Imagine the absolute, blood-freezing shock of unlocking a restricted private door inside Clarence's house, only to find your dead mother's most cherished possession deliberately hidden inside the personal drawer of the woman who replaced her. For nearly 3 decades, one of Princess Diana's most deeply personal, breathtaking pieces of jewelry had been officially listed as missing from the royal records. Its true fate was buried beneath a mountain of heavy palace silence, deliberate administrative confusion, and outright deception. But in a single electrifying moment, that toxic silence was violently shattered. Prince William opened a locked, highly secured drawer inside Queen Camilla's private dressing room, and staring back at him was Diana's long-lost emerald bracelet. He did not scream. He did not summon the royal guards. He simply lifted the heavy velvet box, stared at the deep green stones, and realized with terrifying clarity that the palace apparatus had been lying to him his entire life. Before we drag this explosive, deeply hidden royal secret completely into the light, take a brief moment to subscribe to Crown Shock Chronicles right now and turn on all notifications. We bring you the most authentic, deeply researched, and unfiltered breakdowns of royal history and palace intrigue every single day, ensuring you never miss a revelation. Now, let us step directly into the high-stakes moment that broke the silence of Clarence's house forever. What began as a routine administrative audit quickly escalated into the most catastrophic internal breach in modern royal history. Prince William had entered the Grand London residence expecting nothing more than a tedious review of estate inventory logs and catalogue corrections. The palace was quietly conducting a renewed audit of Princess Diana's private possessions after a single obscure catalogue number failed to match the Central Historical Registry. That single minor clerical discrepancy led the Prince of Wales directly toward a heavily restricted, private dressing room reserved exclusively for Queen Camilla. The Queen was entirely unaware of his presence, away fulfilling state duties elsewhere in London. The heavy silence within her private chambers made every single step William took feel unimaginably tense. The locked mahogany drawer resisted at first, but when William forced the lock open, he moved a folded silk scarf aside, and his heart stopped. Hidden entirely out of sight rested a heavy, worn velvet case. Inside lay the magnificent emerald and diamond bracelet that had mysteriously vanished from Diana's private collection shortly after her tragic death in Paris in 1997. These were not state-owned jewels belonging to the sovereign grant. This was a profoundly intimate, personal possession that was legally mandated to pass directly to her eldest son. It had absolutely no legal or moral right to be inside Camilla's private quarters. Prince William froze in absolute disbelief. Slowly pressing his thumb against the gold clasp, he traced a tiny, almost invisible repair mark, the exact same structural solder his mother had personally pointed out to him during a quiet family evening at Highgrove decades ago. That single microscopic detail violently destroyed every remaining shred of doubt. This was not a replica. This was not an administrative coincidence. This was his mother's bracelet. The future king stood completely still, his hand trembling as his fingers closed around the cold emeralds. The security officer standing in the hallway watched in utter silence as William's initial shock hardened into a cold, ruthless, and controlled fury. Beneath the velvet case, William uncovered the ultimate smoking gun, an old, yellowed inventory tag marked with Diana's exact initials, dated years before Camilla was ever elevated to queen. That label was undeniable proof that whoever placed the bracelet in that drawer knew precisely who it belonged to. No simple mistake could explain the locked velvet case, the hidden drawer, or the deliberately altered palace ledger. William coldly slipped the heavy bracelet directly into his coat pocket. He locked the empty drawer, turned to the terrified security guard, and issued a chilling command: no one was permitted to enter that room under any circumstances. When a panicked aide asked who should be notified of the breach, William answered with a single word: Charles. Long before King Charles could arrive at the scene, Queen Camilla's internal network alerted her that her private sanctuary had been breached and that the bracelet had returned to Diana's son. To understand why finding this jewel inside Camilla's personal drawer felt like a catastrophic betrayal, one must understand what this specific bracelet meant to the young boy who lost his mother. To palace accountants, it was merely an arrangement of high-grade emeralds and flawless diamonds, but to Prince William, It was a living, physical link to his mother's memory. He remembered her fastening it around her wrist before glittering international galas, turning to him with a warm smile to ask if it looked too bright. He remembered holding it carefully in his small hands as a child, while Diana gently warned him never to lose anything placed in his absolute trust. Now, that memory echoed through his mind with devastating force. This was not just a missing asset, it was a violation of his dead mother's legacy. When King Charles practically ran into the room, he immediately demanded to see the jewel. The king collapsed into a heavy armchair, breathing heavily under the weight of the moment. He held the bracelet directly beneath the harsh light of a desk lamp, slowly turned it over, found Diana's repaired clasp, and placed it onto the desk without uttering a single syllable. William watched his father's eyes. That deafening silence felt infinitely worse than a loud denial, because it carried the crushing weight of instant recognition. King Charles knew exactly what that bracelet was, and more terrifyingly, he understood that finding it hidden inside Camilla's private drawer was about to ignite a firestorm that could tear the monarchy apart. In another wing of the residence, Queen Camilla froze as news of the discovery reached her. She frantically demanded to know if William had removed anything else from her private chambers. When her aides remained silent, the color completely drained from her face. King Charles ordered every single staff member out of the room, leaving only himself and his furious son. He practically begged William not to confront Camilla publicly until he heard the full, tragic history behind the jewel. But William flatly refused to promise any restraint. The dark history of the emerald bracelet began during a highly secretive inventory conducted at Kensington Palace shortly after Diana's death in 1997. Because William and Harry were too young to protect their own inheritance, Charles had been granted temporary legal authority over Diana's disputed personal estate. During that emotional review, the bracelet was officially photographed, catalogued, and placed inside a velvet box explicitly reserved for Prince William. However, according to buried household logs, Camilla unexpectedly entered the room during the audit. She aggressively questioned why certain priceless items were being permanently set aside for Diana's sons, arguing that Diana's legacy would continue to overshadow the family unless firm boundaries were established. Charles ordered the staff out to contain the argument, but his passive attempt to maintain peace created the exact opening needed for the velvet box to vanish overnight. By the next morning, the boxes had been moved, and the velvet case marked for Prince William was gone. Decades later, William examined the falsified royal register. The original binding notation reserving the item for Prince William had been crossed out and replaced with the phrase, "removed for specialist conservation." Yet, no independent jeweler had ever signed for the item. When William examined the handwriting on that fake entry, he instantly recognized it. It belonged to a former royal aide who had mysteriously secured a lucrative, high-ranking position inside Camilla's private office shortly after the disappearance. William looked his father dead in the eye and stated in a cold whisper that the bracelet had not been mislaid, it had been stolen. The final showdown took place inside the king's grand library, completely free of advisors, press secretaries, or public relations handlers. William marched into the room, holding his mother's bracelet in its open velvet case. Camilla was already standing there, waiting anxiously beside Charles. William slammed the heavy jewel onto the polished mahogany table, looked directly into the Queen's eyes, and asked the single question that destroyed any possibility of a polite cover-up: why was his mother's bracelet hidden inside her locked drawer? Camilla launched into a desperate defense, claiming the bracelet had been placed in her care during chaotic palace property transfers to protect it from being lost or misallocated. She insisted she was merely preserving it for the family. But William did not raise his voice. His tone remained absolute ice, making the confrontation infinitely more terrifying. He asked why preserving his mother's personal jewelry required hiding it beneath silk scarves in her private dressing room instead of securing it within the heavily guarded royal archives at Windsor. He shoved the falsified inventory registry across the table and demanded the name of the staff member who had forged the entry. Panicking, Camilla reached her hand out toward the emeralds. William slammed the heavy velvet case shut mere millimeters before her fingers could touch the stones. The sharp crack echoed through the library like a gunshot. King Charles physically flinched and turned his face away. William stated with absolute finality that she had no right to ever touch his mother's possessions again. Cornered and stripped of options, Camilla finally admitted the darkest aspect of the secret. She confessed that she had deliberately withheld the box because she had discovered a private, handwritten note from Princess Diana tucked beneath the lining. Note explicitly instructed that the emerald bracelet be handed directly to Prince William before his wedding day. Camilla admitted she hid the box because she feared Diana's final words would dominate the media and overshadow her own standing within the family. William stared at her with pure disgust. She had actively suppressed his dead mother's final wish simply to protect her own public image. By that afternoon, Prince William's ruthless internal inquiry had completely dismantled the administrative protection around Camilla's office. Access logs were seized, rewritten inventories were audited, and corrupt aides were exposed. At the core of the investigation lay a devastating truth: palace insiders had prioritized protecting Camilla's vanity over honoring Princess Diana's final written wishes. King Charles was ultimately forced to make an agonizing choice between his wife and his heir. He picked up his heavy fountain pen and signed an absolute, unchallengeable executive custody decree. The moment that black ink hit the paper, Queen Camilla lost operational authority over the archives. The consequences were swift, brutal, and executed in complete silence. A senior security detail appeared outside Camilla's private archive rooms. Her most trusted longtime aide was coldly ordered to surrender their security clearance on the spot. 3 massive storage vaults containing historical files and private collections were instantly sealed under the king's direct authority. For the first time since becoming queen, Camilla discovered that her royal access card no longer worked. When she swiped her card at the archive door, the scanner flashed red, access denied. When she demanded to know if the king had authorized such a public humiliation, the guard stared straight ahead and confirmed that the king's order was absolute and permanent. The ultimate emotional resolution occurred inside a secure correspondence vault beneath the castle. Prince William and King Charles walked alone into the quiet room, stopping before a sealed steel drawer. Inside lay a faded green envelope bearing Diana's distinct sloping handwriting. Inside that envelope was the original note Diana had written just weeks before her death, reiterating her fierce maternal devotion and explicitly naming William as the sole guardian of her personal legacy. Reading those words in the quiet light of the vault, Prince William realized that despite 30 years of palace silence, deliberate lies, and hidden drawers, his mother's voice had survived. The emerald bracelet was returned to its rightful place within William's private vault, permanently secured beyond the reach of palace politics. The golden age of shadow administration had come to an abrupt end, proving that no matter how deep a royal secret is buried, the truth will eventually force its way into the light.